Ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down all day two options in the 2024 NFL Draft, what positions the Bills will target, who won't be on the board, who will be on the board, and how do we rank those players across position groups. We attempt to answer all of those questions tonight. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour WrestleMania edition. Apparently, Dave, we have decided to pit ourselves here on this Sunday night, which is my fault because being on the West Coast sometimes it makes weekdays a little bit difficult. We decided to pit ourselves up against Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and WrestleMania tonight, so we got that going for us this evening. So thank everyone for being here.
Well, I mean, of course, we're trying to hold ourselves to the highest standard, right? And we love competition. So us
Bring
versus
it on.
WrestleMania, like what? Well, some people aren't into that. So we're here for those people to wind down your weekends and get into it. I was really actually big into wrestlings in the Attitude Era. I was big into it, but I kind of grew out of it. But so it is a little bit nostalgic for me to see The Rock because that was kind of my era there.
We got a bunch of different opinions already coming in the comments section. We have Salinger87 saying his dream scenario is for Bills to sit tight at 28 and snag AD Mitchell and then spend some of that draft capital to move up to the top of the second round to snag Ladd McConkey. You have other people who are on the complete other side of the aisle here. We got Mike Malley Guitar coming in saying, package up all the garbage picks to move up when it matters. So just move on up, right? And then the theme of this show via the super chat from Justin Tyndall. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. He says, I'm 100% team trade down, have 2 2s, use the day 3 picks to trade up and have 2 3s, but we won't have that option because Brandon Beane loves the 5th year option. So tonight we're going to talk through that because the whole theme of tonight's show is day 2 prospects. Who's going to be on the board? Who's not going to be on the board? And it's kind of stinks to have that conversation when you think, well, the Bills only have 1 pick on day 2 of the NFL draft. So at the end of tonight's show, we're going to do a mock draft, 7-round mock draft. And in that mock draft, we're going to have the Buffalo Bills trading out of the first round. We are going to have them picking up hopefully 2. Obviously, they're going to have 2 second-round picks. Then they're going to have a 3rd-round pick. And then they're going to have their 4th-round picks to play with. So it'll be a little bit interesting. It'll be a little bit of a different exercise because after the Stefon Diggs trade, I think a lot of people are antsy to get up and get one of those top 3 bona fide packaged and ready to go wide receivers in Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. Where is your head at right now personally, Dave, after the trade of Stefon Diggs?
Well, if you think about it, it's a little bit counterintuitive in my mind, right? Because, well, I shouldn't say counterintuitive. There are 2 trains of thought. There's you lose Stefon Diggs, and you then feel the pressure to go up and grab one of these studs and kind of include Brian Thomas Jr. in that mix because he'd likely would require you to trade up as well. Maybe not as far, obviously. But the other train of thought is that, hey, you are now 1 less receiver on the roster. Do we want to spend the draft capital to trade up when potentially we know how deep this wide receiver class is? You could still get 2 immediate contributors potentially if you stay put and don't kind of sell future years draft picks or sell really, really premium draft picks to kind of move up. The only way I really see that happening is if Brandon Beane truly feels like one of these 3 guys. And if Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of in that, if Brandon Beane views Brian Thomas Jr. closer to the top 3 than he does kind of the next tier of 7 to 10 guys, then maybe. But to me, that's a tough, really tough call. And that's why he's the GM. My personal mindset is I kind of want to just see what happens and see what falls to 28.
Yeah. Josh Allen is the next. Elway comes in and says, Allen needs separators. He doesn't need number one wide receivers. Kincaid is the number one target. I'm kind of sort of vibing with what the Green Bay Packers have done the last couple of years, where they added in the middle rounds Romeo Doubs, and they added Dontavion Wicks, and early on they added Jaden Reed, and they added Christian Watson. They also added at the tight end position as well in Tucker Kraft and I am blanking on Musgrave. Thank you. So the Bills already have the tight ends in place in Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. The Bills have Curtis Samuel, have Khalil Shakir. So double dipping into the wide receiver pool, even if it's just 28 and a fourth round pick, I would be okay with that. Or maybe it's trade back and you get 2 wide receivers on day 2. Maybe that's one of our scenarios today. We trade back and we take 2 receivers and a safety in the second round and the third round. Like I would be ecstatic, obviously depending on the names that might be possibly available. I don't think you need to necessarily have sort of that X receiver because it takes sometimes it takes the pressure off the offense. Josh Allen doesn't have to worry about force feeding one guy the ball. He can sort of just spread it around.
Yeah, and I think if it gets into the scenario, and I like Pete's comment that he just put in there, if you get to a scenario where you can go up and get a Brian Thomas Jr., let's say, in a trade up, and it does not cost you a future first, I think that's the conversation. That's where the conversation would have to start with it for me. Anything that costs me a future first, I think I'm out on that trade up. However, knowing the Bills have 2 seconds next year, I know they don't have a third this year, but if you get into that range where that trade up isn't going to cost you more than a second plus pick 28, I could get on board with that. And I do think Brian Thomas Jr. would be a good fit in that sort of Gabriel Davis role if they kind of go that route. But tonight, that's not what we're doing. So we'll have to take it another direction tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Tomset made the comment in the Cover One group chat. I think if the Buffalo Bills traded a 1 next year and they got one of the big 3 and those big 3 came out and produced, no one's going to care. You went out and you got that dude. But at the end of the day, too, you've lost so much veteran leadership. You've lost so many players on this football team. You kind of want those draft picks to sort of recultivate the well of talent on your football team. So trading away future ones and stuff, that's going to hurt you as you try to recultivate this roster into future years as well. Again, you'll forget all that if you can get your hands on Neighbors and O'Dunes and they come in day 1 and they do their thing, but you also have that to think of as well. So that's where it gets super interesting. Let's do a quick review of our first round targets before we get into sort of this second tier talk, because one of the things that we talked about was we had extensive conversations on guys like Ladd McConkey, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman. We talked about Darius Robinson, Braden Fisk, right? We talked about those guys at length on our last show. Even a guy like maybe Graham Barton could fall into this scenario as well, even though I think Graham Barton has pretty much secured himself gut feeling in the first round. But some of the names that were on this board, right? We're not going to mention some of these names today. But if the Bills were to trade back from 28 to 40, Ladd McConkey could still be in play. Maybe Xavier Legette could still be in play. Maybe some of the names on this list could still be in play. So if you don't see us mention some of these names tonight, that is because we don't think that they'll be in play at 60. But if the Buffalo Bills do trade back and have a higher second round pick, they very well could be in play. All right. So let's get into it and let's start with our second round tier. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to walk through sort of the second tier board right now. These are guys that are projected to go, or at least I'm projecting to go probably in the second round. And then some of these names will matriculate into the third round. Running backs, I don't think that's a very important position, but Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, those guys could all crack the back half of the second round. The wide receivers, I'm expecting to see have their names called on day 2, early on day 2. Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and Malachi Corley. At tight end, again, not very important, but Jatavion Sanders, Ben Sinnett. Offensive tackle, which maybe with Lyle Collins is not as important, but still the Buffalo Bills could be looking to maybe look a year ahead on Spencer Brown. You have Kingsley Samata out of BYU. You have Patrick Paul. You have Roger Rosengarten out of University of Washington. On the interior of the offensive line, Christian Hayes, who's a big favorite of a lot of people in the Buffalo Bills Mafia community out of Connecticut, Zach Frazier, the center, and Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. And then defensively, your edge defenders. We have had extensive conversations on Marshawn Nealand in this draft. You have Adiza Isaac, Chris Braswell, Jonah Ellis, and Braylon Trice, who could be options at 60s. The interior defenders, Tavondre Sweat just got busted for a DUI last night, but he is projected to go on day 2. Maybe he slips a little bit now. Chris Jenkins, Rook Arororo, and Michael Hall Jr. fit the mold of that 3 technique that Buffalo Bills might want behind Ed Oliver. Linebackers, the Buffalo Bills probably will not go for, but Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, Edgerrin Cooper are all slotted to start going off the board in the second round. And then cornerbacks are interesting. I got 3 guys highlighted in red here. Rankistra out of Missouri, Lassiter out of Georgia, TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. I have them highlighted because, like, who knows? This cornerbacks are weird. Those guys could go in the first 32 picks for all we know, but they could also be there at pick 60. More than likely at pick 60, the Bills will be choosing from guys like Max Mountain, Cam Hart, Mike Sanastriel out of Michigan, even though he's a nickel corner. And then safety, another big position of need for the Buffalo Bills. The second round, Tyler Newman, Javon Bullard, Keelan Bullock, and Cole Bishop are sort of the names that I think will start coming off the board first in the second round at the safety position. So, Dave, I'll keep this up for a minute here. What names sort of stick out to you on this list in the second round for the Buffalo Bills?
Well, I'll start with the wide receiver first group there you have highlighted with receivers, right? I think every single one of those guys would be of interest to me. Malachi Corley, I think, becomes less of an interest to me, just given that he's more of a yak guy. And I think between Samuel and Shakir, they kind of have that skill set covered. So that would be, that's a player I really like, but I don't know if that's someone that really would add to the room, right? As far as what the Bills need. So, but I do, any one of those other guys you had up there on the receiver list, especially Javon Baker, who I've been very supportive of for most of this process. And he's the guy on the cover of our thumb for tonight's show. I put him there for a reason. He was the guy I picked in, my first mock draft Monday of this year, where I actually had the Bills trading down to pick 66 and snagging Baker there. To me, he fits that sort of body control X type of stylistic receiver. I know people are going to point out the drops issues with Javon Baker, but I think that's a little bit of an overstated narrative given his ADOT was one of the highest in college football, going up a lot of contested catches. So I'm not so worried about his drops.
And you just see the way he plucks the ball out of the air too. And he had that huge one-handed grab at the Big 12 Pro Day as well. I mean, the guy's got good hands. I think you're right. The average depth of target probably throws off that catch percentage.
So look, any one of those receivers, even if it ended up being Corley, right? Even if he was, I like all of the names on that list, right? And so I'll start with that group. And then I start kind of thinking about, well, if the Bills do take a receiver, let's say at 28, and now we're talking about this second round, okay, maybe they don't double dip immediately. I start then looking at the defensive line, right? You had some of those guys up there, Nealand. I really like Jonah Ellis. I don't think Tavondre Sweat was a fit before this DWI he just got as far as archetype fit. So I don't think he really would have been on the Bills' radar, although a lot of Bills Mafia loves Sweat. I think he'd be off for me. So then I start looking at guys like Jenkins and Hall. And so that group there of edge defenders and interior defenders of Jenkins and Hall, that's kind of where I lean. Before the signing of Mike Edwards, I probably would have had safety a little bit higher up on my priority list, but I'm beginning to, with the Bills only having that one day 2 pick, I'm beginning to kind of move safety down my priority list. As much as I love Javon Bullard and Cole Bishop, I think just for me, if the Bills end up just having that one pick on day 2, I'm probably going the trenches, right? Assuming they take a receiver early on. And the O-line, I love those guys. Haynes is awesome. I love him. Beebe, I did a lot of research on him today, catching up a bit on my offensive line research, and he's really,
I wanted him to come out last year.
he's just like he's like at the top of my list right now
Yeah.
as far as like linemen. So if Cooper Beebe is the pick too in the
Mhm.
second,
Yeah.
no complaints from me.
Yeah, Justin Tindall comes in with a super chat. He says, "I'm 100% team trade down, have 2 2s." Oh, that was from before. He had another one. Oh, my apologies, Justin. He says, "We talking about receivers, but must say I was very underwhelmed by James Cook's pass catching. He was drafted as a pass catching back more than a runner. So many dumb drops. Don't disagree." And I think the Buffalo Bills had Trey Benson out of Florida State in for a top 30 visit. I thought that was kind of peculiar, right? Like, but if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're losing Stefon Diggs, maybe there's like a new approach and you're really looking to put 2 monsters in the backfield. So you have a guy like Trey Benson, you have a guy like James Cook. Maybe you're looking for that, 2-headed monster. Like, and when I say monster, I mean monster in the backfield to go along with whatever pass catching weapons you add to the room and Josh Allen as well. But at the end of the day, I think I would be really disappointed if the Buffalo Bills went in that direction. I really hope that if the Buffalo Bills do take a running back early, it's like there's just a guy sticking on the board in the 4th round that you can't pass on. But if they take one on day 2, given some of the needs that I think they have, I'm going to be pretty upset by that. When I look at the tiers here, wide receiver, I've made the statement this year and I'm going to stick to it. I am Switzerland. I could sell myself on any of these receivers. The Buffalo Bills draft them. I will figure it out in my mind why they fit, how they fit. There is no Quentin Johnston in this draft where I look at the receiver. I'm just like, I really, really, really hope that they are not the pick. There is just so many good receivers in this draft. No one that really sticks out as like in my mind, like I don't get it. I don't understand what people are seeing. It's obviously all about how the Buffalo Bills envision utilizing whatever player they draft, because there's a ton of unique skill sets in this group. Like Pearsall's inside outside, Roman Wilson's inside outside, but he should be primarily inside. Troy Franklin is literally just going to be like a Darius Slayton, like boundary, get down the field, take the top off, open things up for guys underneath type of dude. And he can obviously probably do that from the slot too, but he's not going to be that shifty guy in the slot. Jalen Polk, like I've mentioned before, reminds me of Jacoby Myers. Love his game. Baker's going to be a guy who does some Gabriel Davis type stuff. Might be a souped up Gabriel Davis, a little obviously thinner than Gabriel Davis was, but he's that boundary presence. He's that downfield presence. And then you got Malachi Corley, who's just the yak monster. So the Bills are just like adding a Curtis Samuel on steroids. If you add a guy like Malachi Corley, he's more, I don't want to say he's Debo, but he's in that Debo mold where you just want to give him the ball and you want to get him the ball in space. I think the 2 receivers I'm lowest on, probably Coleman because of the advanced analytics. And we talked about him in the round 1 show. And I'm probably the lowest on Corley as well, just because like he's the yak king, but he came from a smaller school. So what was the competition really like? Who are those guys like he went up against? He went to the Senior Bowl and he showed he does have chops as a route runner, but there's a difference between showing it in the Senior Bowl and then going out and showing it in the NFL. Given all the receivers on the board in the 2nd round, I like Malachi Corley, but I think I would probably like, that would be the one where I'm just like, all right, I get it. Joe Brady likes his yak kings, but that's probably the one I'm lowest on.
And he can block too. So that's the other, that's the other good thing. I mean, look, I think it just comes down for us. We're not necessarily low on the player. We're just like, what about the fit, right?
Yeah.
I think it's more about like, what do we need to add to the room, right? And I think we need to add a guy that can stretch out the field a little bit, right? Like so much stuff around the line of scrimmage is fine. It can be efficient, but like you do need some guys that can stretch the field a bit. And so look, maybe he can become that guy, but at least right now, like there are other options that I think are better.
Yeah, I mean, looking around, safeties, like I really do think Javon Bullard and Kalen Bullock, and even to another extent, Tyler Nubin, because I think Tyler Nubin's probably the top safety on the board. I really do think that those guys will be on the Bills' radar, because if you get a guy like Kalen Bullock in the 2nd round or a guy like Javon Bullard in the 2nd round, you're getting a bona fide center fielder. Tyler Nubin too. You're getting a bona fide. I just, for some reason, I feel like the Bills would vibe more with Bullard and Bullock than a Tyler Nubin, but I like all 3 for the same things, for the same reasons. They're true center fielders. Cole Bishop is probably a guy you're going to want to live in the box, sort of more like Taylor Rapp. I don't think Cole Bishop will fit what the Buffalo Bills have in mind for what they want to add at safety. But if you're the Buffalo Bills and you can get your hands on Bullock, Bullard, or Newbin in the second round, you all of a sudden can make Mike Edwards a plug and play versatile backup. He can be Taylor Rapp's backup. He can be whatever free safety you draft's backup. He can be the backup to Teron Johnson, which we talked about being super important. So you go from a steady, dependable starter to an upper echelon backup in Mike Edwards if you draft one of these guys, and you can just bring these guys along slowly if it takes them a little while to develop. Like a guy like Kalen Bullock, he's a legit center fielder, but he probably needs help. He probably needs work at the line of scrimmage doing things like run support. But if you look at the one trait that the Bills secondary is still missing, they're missing that true Micah Hyde center fielding replacement. Edwards can do it, but he's on a 1-year deal. This could be in Bullard or Bullock or Newbin. It could be your Micah Hyde of the future.
Yeah, and if you place that importance right on the position, which the Bills look, Hyde was the first big free agent signing they made, right? In the Beane, McDermott. I think it might even Whaley might have even signed Micah Hyde from what I recall. I could be wrong about that, but he was like the big first signing they made in the McDermott era, right? And Poyer was a savvy signing, but I don't think anyone expected him to turn out the way he turned out with that duo. So there is an argument to be made that the Bills can find diamonds in the rough, but like that was a lottery ticket, what you found with Jordan Poyer, right? And signing him, like there's no guarantee you're going to find that again. And I know this team and this coaching staff is really good at coaching up the secondary, but if you can get a blue chipper, a guy that you really feel can be that guy back there for almost a decade, knowing how important that combo of Hyde and Poyer had been to the Bills' success on defense over the last 6 odd years, whatever it's been, 5-6 years, then maybe that is worth it to you, right? If you're Brandon Beane, and maybe instead of waiting, you take the guy there, and then maybe you maneuver back into the third with those 2 4th-rounders you have. So we'll see. We'll see.
We got Pete Nana coming in saying Hicks and DTD at safety in the second round mix, 2 for me. We're going to talk about DTD in a little bit here when we get into the third round guys. I like to temper my expectations for the draft projection of Shrine Bowl guys, just because like there's a reason why they were Shrine Bowl guys. And there are guys that elevate themselves at the Shrine Bowl, like DTD did, like Zay Flowers did last year, like Mason McCormick has done this year. But I like to temper my expectations for them a little bit. Maybe the hype really is real. And NFL execs believe the same things that like draft Twitter believes. But right now, I think the DTD love might be more draft Twitter, myself included, than it is maybe NFL execs. So I'm going to have him on my third round board, and we're going to talk about him as a third round option if the Buffalo Bills do trade back, like we will do in this scenario. The last position groups I wanted to focus on here is the defensive line, because the Buffalo Bills, Brandon Beane talked about it in Orlando. They love the lines. Like they put an emphasis on the lines, whether we as fans like it or not. The Buffalo Bills put an emphasis on the defensive line. You mentioned Sweat, not an archetype fit. He's got that DWI. I think he's off the board here. But if you're the Buffalo Bills, you have a 32-year-old Daquan Jones, and you have Austin Johnson and Deshaun Williams on 1-year deals, and you have Elianku. You're not exactly loaded at depth at defensive tackle. You would probably want to add another interior defender to this mix. And these 3 names here are really intriguing. And it now comes to a philosophical head here, Dave. I'm going to ask you a question, because Chris Jenkins is a guy who could probably play 3 tech and 1 tech. You know, he's going to come in from day one and be a run stuffer. And he's got pass rush upside based on his athletic ability, but he hasn't necessarily shown it. Whereas Rook Orokoro and Michael Hall Jr., these are bona fide 3 techs. These are the guys that are going to sit behind Ed Oliver, and they're going to get the snaps behind Ed Oliver. They're not going to have the versatility, except for on passing downs, being next to Ed Oliver. So Daquan Jones goes down, Orokoro or Hall Jr., they're not going to step in and fill the shoes of a Daquan Jones like a Chris Jenkins might be able to. So if you're the Buffalo Bills and it's the second round, are you looking for the true Ed Oliver backup, or are you looking for a versatile guy who can do both in Chris Jenkins?
as much as the Bills have tooled and retooled this defensive line since Brandon Beane's been here, and every
Mhm.
year we kind of have this conversation, and the Bills just like they get it, they get it right most of the way, but they haven't really gotten it right the whole way. And I know that they've had issues with the defensive line, especially come playoff time, like not showing up, right? And I think if you're Brandon Beane and you're looking to take a guy in the second round at the interior, I don't think you necessarily care what their natural, like
Mhm.
if it's going to be like a one tech backup or three tech or someone who, I think you just take the guy that you feel like is going to help batter your football team for the long run. And when I
Mhm.
say the long run, I mean like the next 4 to 5 years, right? Because we've seen how important it can be to have interior defensive line be disruptors in playoff football, and the Bills haven't had that. So to me, I would try to find the guy maybe that
Mhm.
from a mentality standpoint is that guy that like has that sort of edge to him as far
Mhm.
as like the mental side, the tenacity. And if that's the guy that maybe that's the Ed Oliver backup, or maybe it's more of a like, I don't care. Like that's the
Mhm.
kind of guy I want. I think it's like the mental side of whoever you might take in that interior if you were to go in that second round. And I think all three of those guys that are on the list there um would fit that bill. Jenkins, Orokoko, and Hall, right? And
Mhm.
I think there's not going to be necessarily consensus on those three as to which is the best, right? And so the Bills could find themselves in a situation where maybe they had Jenkins like well above the other
Yeah.
ones and he's sitting there and they just can't pass him up. And I'm not going to be upset if they do that.
Yeah.
So,
We got Spin coming in saying if you get a backup, if you're getting a backup three tech for Oliver, go get the guy who's the best at three tech. Them being able to do both is just a plus, but not a factor in them picking them. I think Michael Hall Jr. is a guy the Buffalo Bills could absolutely fall in love with, like the pedigree of being a high recruit, going to Ohio State, um, adding all that weight. He's now up to almost 300 pounds. His arsenal of sort of pass rush moves. I think Michael Hall Jr. could be a type of guy the Buffalo Bills could fall in love with in this pre-draft process. And then Rantingly comes in with a really good comment too. He says, we haven't drafted an IDL the last 2 years. I think it has to be a priority this year. Need some youth and long-term cost control there. Brandon Beane, like he was pretty transparent after the draft is over how pissed he was last year. He's like, I want to take a tackle. Every single round, it just the board just did not fall. Like he seemed legitimately perturbed that he didn't walk out of the draft last year with a defensive tackle, and really nothing has changed. If anything, it's gotten worse. Daquan
yep.
Jones has gotten a year older. I like Austin Johnson, but then it's Deshaun Williams behind. Like it's gotten worse. So if you're Brandon Beane and you got very little money to spend in free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills' first pick is a defensive tackle before wide receiver. Like I really do think this is a position the Buffalo Bills are going to zero in on. I think it's going to be defensive tackle. I think it's going to be a player in the secondary of some nature. It's probably going to be two wide receivers, and it's probably going to be an offensive lineman of some sort. Like I really do feel like that's what the Buffalo Bills are going to hone in on in this draft. Just to sort of close out round two here, I think Nealand fits the Bills archetype, but I wouldn't be surprised if they fell in love with a guy like Chris Braswell to come rush the passer out of Alabama. Brandon Beane was at the Alabama Pro Day. I like Jonah Ellis. I don't know how much the Bills will like a smaller type of edge like Jonah Ellis, but I just want to get it out there that I'm a big fan of his game out of the University of Utah. Haynes would be really interesting. BB would be super interesting. You could plug them in at left guard, and you'd have two mammoths in Torrance and either Haynes or BB between Connor McGovern. And Roger Rosengarten just seems like an Aaron Cromer offensive lineman. He just does. The University of Washington guy, he just has the size. He just has the look of a guy that Aaron Cromer would fall in love with. He's got left-right versatility. Mel Kiper even said if he would have went back to college another year, which just didn't make sense for him because of all that talent leaving the University of Washington, he might have been a first-round draft pick next year. So a guy like Roger Rosengarten on day two sticks out to me as just someone like the Buffalo Bills might not need him now, but I think that they could really fall in love with a player like that. So don't sleep on Roger Rosengarten. Also, don't sleep on Picasso's Pizza, this show's official sponsor. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out of towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right. Looking now at the third round tier, and let's just go sort of position by position here. Obviously, like I said, running backs, tight ends, really not all of that important. But guys like Braylon Allen, guys like Blake Corum, guys like Marshawn Lloyd, guys like Isaac Guerrero could be coming off the board somewhere starting around the third round. Theo Johnson and Cade Stover could be coming off the board somewhere in the third round. And then let's hone in now on wide receiver. You got Jalen McMillan, the third in that trio out of the University of Washington. You got Jermaine Burton, who might be a first-round talent out of Alabama. I get a lot of Kenny Stills vibes from him, but at the same time, there are some character concerns there. You have Malik Washington out of the University of Virginia, Tez Walker out of the University of North Carolina, Jamari Thrash out of the University of Louisville, and Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Some other people might put Brendan Rice in this category as well. I didn't, mostly because it wouldn't fit on the graphic. And I kind of feel like he might slip into early day 3, just with how loaded this draft class is at wide receiver, but you never know. Like some of those names from the second round tier could fall into the third round. Some of the third round guys could go. Tez Walker could go to the Bills at 60 for all we know, right? So honing in on these receivers here, who sticks out to you as some of the ones that you like?
Well, I like Burton as far as what he brings on the field, right? I think he's got some of the best hands in the class. I believe has only been charged with 4 drops his entire career, no drops in 2023. McMillan obviously being kind of that third guy in that Washington offense going back to a year ago, obviously is where you kind of go and look at the tape for him and say, wow, that's a guy that, if he hadn't gotten hurt, maybe he's being talked about as a borderline, round 1, round 2 type of guy. People have fallen in love with Malik Washington during the pre-draft process, and we know how much attention Jamari Thrash got at the Senior Bowl practices. So all of those guys are super interesting to me. I'm kind of out on Johnny Wilson personally, but
oh yeah, no, thank you.
So I think every other guy in that list I'd be interested in the third. Like if we end up having a third rounder, right? Let's say like in our scenario tonight, we end up trading back and we get an extra third somewhere. Like those guys are super interesting to me. Tez Walker seems to be a polarizing figure among both the draft community and sort of like the the content creator community, because you wonder about his route tree. We saw what he did with Drake May at UNC last year. Field stretcher, can just absolutely kill you on those post routes, those deep, go routes. Like he's made for that type of style. What can he do otherwise? But at the same time, like, would the Bills need him to do otherwise in year 1? So maybe they say the athletic profile, which was fantastic, right, from a testing standpoint, is super intriguing to us. His length, his ability to stretch the field could be interesting. This is where you start getting into the group of guys that they're not niche guys yet, but there are guys that aren't necessarily the complete packages of some of the guys we've obviously already talked about. I do think McMillan, out of that entire group, has the biggest potential to be the most complete package guy of that group.
And even McMillan too, like maybe it's just because of the other guys that were there, but like most of his snaps in college were out of the slot. He's got the prototype. Like he's got the build, the size, the height, the weight, the speed of a guy who can play on the boundary, but UW just like never did it. So maybe Jalen McMillan is like that big-ish slot, like Amon-Ra St. Brown type of guy. Outside of Jermaine Burton and Tez Walker here, though, I think a lot of these guys sort of scream, this is the back half of a double dip. This is the icing on the cake type of players. Like, and like, I think you could even throw Tez Walker into that category as well. Jermaine Burton is a first round caliber player. If the Buffalo Bills are like, no one else is going to draft this guy, I know he's going to be there in the third round. We can go and we can take a defensive tackle and the safety in the second round on a trade back. And then we know Jermaine Burton will be sitting there for us in round 3. Do it. Like, kudos to you for having those balls. Go ahead and do it, Brandon Beane. But in terms of everyone else, Malik Washington, Jalen McMillan, those are like some slot guys that you can add after you've added a boundary guy. A guy like Tez Walker, like Tez Walker is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He is DJ Chark. Like that's who he is. He's just a guy, go run down the field, we're going to chuck you the ball 3, 4, 5 times a game, and you're going to take the top off the defense and open up things for guys underneath. Now, with his athletic profile, and if the Buffalo Bills really do dig the pre-draft top 30 visit that they're doing with him, they think, well, in year one, we can do that. It's kind of the Brian Thomas Jr. plan that Eric laid out for Brian Thomas Jr. We're just going to throw you the ball 5 times a game, and it's mostly going to be you running 3 different routes all down the field to open up things for everyone else underneath. But over the years, you will learn more of the route tree. And over the years, we'll ask you to do more and more and more. And by year 3, you won't just be a Z receiver, you'll be an X receiver. They could see that in Tez Walker. Now, obviously, we had John Helmkamp on here, and we were very underwhelmed at his ability to do those things at the Senior Bowl, but he does have it on tape that he has done it in college. And I think that the Buffalo Bills might like a guy like Tez Walker more than the Buffalo Bills do. Jamari Thrash is one of my favorite receivers in this draft. I think he gives me a lot of like Stefon Diggs, even a lot of like John Brown vibes, right? If you don't want to go as far as Stefon Diggs, gives me some John Brown guys vibes. A guy who can play on the outside, is going to play on the outside, but also can give you a little bit on the inside as well. I think outside of Burton, those are some really fun double dip pieces. Some really, really fun double dip pieces. But I do think I'd be a little underwhelmed if they were our first pick. So let's move on. Let's get past offensive line for now. We'll come back to offensive line. Let's talk safeties. Because if the Buffalo Bills, say, trade back into the second round, like we're going to prognosticate at the end here, and they have 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick, maybe they go defensive tackle, wide receiver in the second round. They add Chris Jenkins, they add Michael Hall, and on top of that, they add one of those receivers like Javon Baker as well. So the Buffalo Bills, they have options in the third round. They could go best running back on the board. They could add an offensive lineman. They could add double dip at wide receiver, or they could look to add another safety because really you're only on the hook for Taylor Rapp for 1 year, and Mike Edwards is on a 1-year deal. Some of the guys that could be sitting on the board towards the tail end of the third round, D'Adarian Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech, the guy we've talked at length about on the show, blew up the Shrine Bowl, had a really good combine. Cam Kinchins, a guy who is has a lot of supporters here at Cover One, guys like Pro Anth. He played under Buffalo Bills current cornerbacks coach Jamil Adai when Adai was at the University of Florida. He can play multiple sort of safety positions. You have Jaden Hicks out of Washington State, and you have Bo Braid out of Maryland. Those are all names that maybe could be sitting there at the back half of the third round. Do any of those safeties sort of stick out to you?
I mean, they all do, right? You talk about DTD. Is he a guy that maybe, like you said, the NFL GMs and front offices aren't as high on as like the draft community? Maybe not. If that's the case, does he possibly slip into day 3, right? I mean, you just don't know with a guy like that. Bo Braid, obviously really good testing athletically from him, but to me, like I look at a guy like Kinchins who didn't test well athletically, but on tape seems to have all the boxes checked, right? And instinctually, the way he moves, and I know like at the combine, like
he reminds me of Poyer, man.
Certain things like testing wise, at like where you get the numbers, it didn't come out, but when you watched him actually like do some of the drills, he looked pretty fluid and smooth to me doing the drills. So I feel like that's a guy like, how much will bad testing really affect his draft stock from the GM, NFL front offices and GMs? Because he put it on tape at Miami and was just like a super heady player there. So if he's a guy that the Bills haven't taken a safety yet, let's say, and they want to kind of trade back up into round 3, or maybe they've traded down to acquire a round 3 pick and they haven't taken a Bullard right at that point, or someone like that, and they feel like Kinchins could be a safety of the future, then I'm all for a guy like that. And so I'm going to try really hard to not let the testing numbers influence my perception of him too much. And so it's an interesting, he to me is kind of like the the swing in this whole thing is like, where does a
Yeah.
guy like Kim Kinchins go? Is he a guy that starts a run on safeties? Is he a guy
Yep.
that drops? Like, it'll be really interesting to see where he ends up actually getting picked.
Yeah, Nikki G comes in and says Bo Braid is a playmaking safety. He forces fumbles over and over. I don't know if it's the Maryland sticker on the helmet, but he reminds me a lot of Darnell
Darnell
Savage
Savage.
coming out.
Yeah,
So,
he
but I mean,
does.
he's a force in the line of scrimmage. Jaden Hicks can lay the lumber on
Yeah.
people. And the thing about Jaden Hicks, like I like Jaden Hicks, but Jaden Hicks tested well, so maybe you feel like he has the potential to do it, even though he hasn't really done it. And Bo Braid, what's their range, right? Like, are you looking for the Micah Hyde drop back into center field type? If you are, I don't know if Bo Braid or a
Well,
guy like Jaden Smith are going to be on the Bills' radar. I think they're looking for maybe someone who can center field it. And you're looking at DTD there because he gives you that versatility. He can do both. You're looking at Cam Kinchins because he's done that in college, even though his testing numbers weren't great. Like, those are the center fielder types. And DTD and Cam Kinchins have both showed they can do the line of scrimmage as well.
yeah, I mean, it's the same exact conversation with Hicks as it was for Cole Bishop, right? Like, tested really well, showed that he could run, showed that he could, handle the drills. But when you watch the games of Utah where he excelled the most were the games where he was down and around the line of scrimmage and kind of getting into the backfield as a run stopper.
Mm-hmm.
So same kind of thing for Hicks. I'm not going to be upset about it, right? But I do think there might be better fits if they really want to go for a center fielder,
Mm-hmm.
because the reason we're saying that, I think, right, is because of what we see, this multi-year deal they gave Taylor Rapp, right? So we just kind of like think a little bit, presume that he's going to at least be locked in as a starter for a
Mm-hmm.
year or so, but maybe not, right? Maybe they go and they say this guy's going to end up being better than Rapp. We think he's going to be better than Rapp, and then maybe Rapp moves back to being
Yeah.
that third safety, even though what they're paying him. So
Looking at some of the other options along the defensive line, a guy that you really like, Austin Booker, a guy that we really like, Javon Solomon, a guy that I know I'm a huge advocate of, Gabriel Murphy, a guy that we both like in Jalix Hunt. And then I think even Mo Kamara might have tested his way maybe into the back half of day 3. There are some fun edge defenders there, Dave, but like I look at that list of edge defenders and I like all of them, but I also say to myself when I look at that list of edge defenders, man, this is a weak class. Man, I would prefer them in round 4.
yeah, and I think that, to me, I think every single one of those guys outside of maybe Mo Kamara, honestly,
Yeah.
might be the one guy I would say could legit
Which is
be.
funny because he's not the Bills archetype. So it's probably the least
I know.
likely one they're going to draft.
Exactly. But I agree with you. I do think all the others, I think, to
Mhm.
me, they're not day 2. I think I'd probably bump them down to early day 3, but maybe
Yeah.
given the lack of depth maybe in this edge
That's
class, like, I
that's
don't.
why this is a projection board, and like there's
Yep.
just a lack of depth in this class, and people are going to take edge rushers no matter what. Like, so those I think are the guys that come off the board towards the back half, like Solomon and Hunt specifically, because they're small school guys with like pretty sweet measurables. Austin Booker had a really bad combine, but also he got a lot of love at the Senior Bowl, and then Murphy blew up the Shrine Bowl, Kamara blew up the Shrine Bowl. So like those to me those are the guys who made a buzz in the off. These are the buzziest edge defenders that weren't the top guys. So to me, those are the ones that are going to start to fall off the board late 3rd, early 4th. And then the interior defenders here, I'll tell you what, like Mason Smith is Mason Smith. Like we talked about how he has the size of a Jeffrey Simmons, of a Dan Williams. Like he looks the part. He's now going to be 2 years removed from an ACL. He could be a real steal. Who knows? A team could just think about all the things that I just said and take him in the 2nd round. Dwayne Carter, we are a huge fan of Dwayne Carter. I would love Dwayne Carter if we could get him in the 3rd round. Like if we could go wide receiver, or wide receiver safety in the 2nd round, and then Dwayne Carter is sitting there for us in the 3rd round after a trade back, I would lose my absolute freaking mind. I would send Brandon Beane a bouquet of flowers. Like it would be on. Same with a guy like Gabe Hall, who I really like, has that versatility to be 1 tech, 3 tech, wherever you sort of need him. And then Mekhi Wingo falls into that Michael Hall Jr. Rook Aroro type where it's just a pure 3 tech. He would be your 4th guy and he would come in for Ed Oliver, or he play with Ed Oliver on passing downs. But there are some like this interior defender class, like people like to chat on it a little bit, but I like some of these. There aren't a lot, but I like some of these guys. I like all 4 of the guys in this list here.
Yeah, I like all of those guys on this list, and I know like we keep getting comments about like we don't have a 3rd round. Yeah, we know we're going to do a scenario tonight where we put ourselves in a position to
Yes.
put the Bills in a position to have a third rounder. So these are all like hypotheticals under the guise of the Bills
Mhm.
making a move to end up with a third
And
rounder, whether that's either
we could always trade up
tonight's
back into the third round too. That's another option.
right, right. So
Um,
I think
Sorry, you can keep going.
I was gonna say it's either you're gonna trade down to acquire
Yeah.
it from like maybe your second round pick, or you're gonna trade a couple of your
Mhm.
fourths to move up. So we'll see.
There are some offensive linemen in the middle of this draft that I absolutely love too. Like Blake Fisher is good. Delmar Glaze is good. Dominic Pooney is good. Pooney's probably going to be a guard. Brandon Coleman could be either a left tackle or left guard. Brandon Coleman is one of my favorite players in this draft. Like watching Steve Avila last year, you had Avila at left guard and you had Coleman at right or at left tackle, and they were just so much fun to watch. And now you talk about Brandon Coleman, of course, sort of has that Aaron Cromer archetype where maybe you could see him kicking inside to left guard and competing with a guy like David Edwards, but also having that versatility to in 2025 slide over to right tackle and be the future at right tackle. If we can't sign a guy like Spencer Brown to an extension, Brandon Coleman is one of my favorite guys in this draft class. If we get him in the third or the fourth round, I will be very, very happy man on our Cover One live stream. And on the interior, there's some really good players here, right? Tanner Bortolini blew up the combine. He has sort of got a lot of really good movement skills that you're interested in. And I know Aaron Kromer might be interested in from the center. You have Christian Mahogany, who's an Osiris Torrance type. So you'd have those two big, thick bodies in between Connor McGovern at center if you slot him in at left guard. And then Mason McCormick blew up the Shrine Bowl. Jim Nagy came out and said, what a huge whiff on my part. He should have been at the Senior Bowl. This is a guy who some people think has center flex too. Mason McCormick is a huge, huge riser in this pre-draft process out of South Dakota State. A lot of people like him as well. I really would not mind if the Buffalo Bills at some point, if they get a third rounder or with one of their fourth rounders, picked a lane, whether it's center, whether it's tackle guard flex, or whether it's guard center flex, picked a lane and took an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, Pooney, obviously, he's got a ton of experience. He's played
Mm-hmm.
tackle, he's played guard over his career, two different programs. You mentioned Coleman. He's always been, for weeks now, I feel like he's been like almost in every mock draft I do because I just like him and just always is there at the right time. Obviously tested well athletically. You mentioned, I think with those short arms, you probably see him move into guard at the next level, would be my guess. So that's a nice fit, I feel like, because that's a guy that in a pinch could move back out to the
Mm-hmm.
outside. So Coleman is obviously one of our show favorites, I think,
Yeah.
when it comes down to it for that. And then McCormick, yeah, you mentioned like obviously freaky athletic, tested crazily well.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the guard center flexibility there. That's super interesting to me. Bortolini, you turned me on to him a couple weeks ago, and now I've kind of not been able to shake him. I just keep seeing him, and that's going against guy we're not going to talk about today, but my NC State guy there at center. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, look, I mean, I think what you said makes sense. Like you pick a lane, which decision do you want to go with? When you start to get to
Mm-hmm.
this area of the draft, maybe these guys are better than like a Nick Broker of last year
Yeah.
because they're a little bit more talented. But like that type of flexibility is kind of what you're looking for as you start to get into the end of day 2, beginning of day 3. I always talk about I want my early picks to be studs. I want them to, I don't care about the versatility with the early picks. That was the hill I died on last year with a guy like Osiris Torrance. I did not care that he was exclusively a right guard. He's a stud at right guard, and that's awesome. As you start to get now into end of day 2, early day 3, having the guys with versatility who are likely going to start out as backups is a good thing. And I think the Bills would be
Mm-hmm.
looking for something like that.
Yeah, Jessica Tennis comes in and says, does a fourth and a sixth rounder give you a third rounder? If you're looking to get back into the third rounder and you're using like the Rich Hill trade value chart as gospel, you're talking both your fourth round picks, and that's not even enough. You're going to have to throw in a kicker. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, that's kind of steep. Getting back into the third round might be a little difficult. Now, not every GM follows like the value chart. Maybe there's a team that's low on draft picks and they want to add more draft picks. So they'll take a fourth and a fifth, or they'll take a fourth and a fifth and a middle round pick next. Like the trade charts are not followed as gospel, but A fourth and a sixth probably will not get you where you want to go, especially because our fourth rounders are at the tail end of the fourth round. They're not early on in the fourth round. So, Dave, now that we're starting to talk about these options here, tonight we're going to be trading back out of round one. So, you want to fire up the mock draft simulator here and then simulate it to the Bills pick. And there are two trade scenarios that I want to walk the people through sort of this evening. And I could have gone the route of a team trading back up for a quarterback, but I didn't have time to sort of research which teams and what the return would be on investment. So I sort of honed in on two trades, Dave, that I think that we could make tonight. One was there was a report from Matt Miller of ESPN, and they asked him, they're like, if there's one team who's going to trade back into the first round, who do you think it's going to be? He said, listen, I'm hearing some things, I'm predicting some things. The Washington Commanders don't have a left tackle. They really do not. They're going to take a quarterback with the second pick. Could the Washington Commanders and their arsenal of draft picks and their new GM get aggressive and trade back into the first round for a left tackle? So if you're the Buffalo Bills and a guy like Mims or a guy like Guyton is still on the board, even maybe a guy like Jonathan Morgan is still on the board, maybe the Washington Commanders come a call into the Buffalo Bills and you can drop back to pick number 36 and you can pick up their third rounder at pick 67. So when we run through the simulator, if one of those tackles are still on the board, I say we make that trade even if we have to force it, because I think that that's a realistic trade that we could see on draft day.
Yep.
If those tackles are gone, the next thing is that means maybe some defensive players are dropping. And you're going to have the Arizona Cardinals who pick right before us. They're probably going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, right? And then they're going to get probably a Terrion Arnold or a corner or someone like that at pick number 27. But we've seen teams, the New York Jets specifically, right? You have this new regime in Arizona going into year 2. Maybe they want to get ultra aggressive and they want to fire up the fan base. I can see a team like the Arizona Cardinals wanting to come up from 35 and add a third player on a 5th-year option. Maybe a Cooper DeJean is on the board, or maybe a defensive lineman is on the board that they really want to add. So if the tackles are gone and we can't make this move with the Commanders, I say we make the move of 28 and maybe this pick will cost us a little bit more, 133 and 144, to move up and get Arizona's 35 or to move down to get Arizona's 35 and pick up their third rounder, pick 66. So those are the two trade scenarios that I sort of have in the bank. If you want to run the simulator here, when we get to pick 28, we can sort of assess our options.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned pick 66 because in the first mock draft Monday I did, not this past Monday, but the one before, I had made that trade. I did make a trade with the Arizona Cardinals and traded down to pick 66. And I was moving all over the board and ended up picking Javon Baker with that pick at 66. Now, this obviously is a little bit unrealistic, I think, because Latu's on the board.
So the Cardinals took TJ Tampa, and who'd they take in the early parts of the draft here?
Neighbors.
They took Malik Neighbors. Oh, the Patriots passed on a quarterback. Who did the Commanders take? They took Jaden Daniels. All right. So the Commanders, what are the tackles on the board here?
All right. Let's see. We got Aaron Barton still on the board.
He's more of an interior guy.
Yeah. Tackles have pretty much been.
I think taken. we're making a trade with the Washington Commanders here, or not the Washington Commanders, excuse me. We're making a trade here with the Arizona Cardinals because I think that they could look at, if you go back to the top of the best available.
Oh, sorry.
I think the Cardinals, we can add Letty Latu to go along with TJ Tampa and Malik Neighbors. Oh, we can add Jackson Powers Johnson or Graham Barton to go along with Malik Neighbors and TJ Tampa. I think that's something that's really intriguing to the Arizona Cardinals. I think they might get a little aggressive. So the trade is going to be Buffalo trading 28. It's going to cost us a little bit more than the trade with the Commanders would have. 28, 133, and 134. So that's what's going to cost, I think, to get us up to get the 35th and the 66th pick from the Arizona Cardinals. So essentially, in points, the Buffalo Bills are giving away 239 on the Richville trade value chart. The Cardinals are giving away 246. So the Bills are winning this trade by 7 points, but the Cardinals are the ones moving up and getting the 5th-year option. So it's the trade should favor the Buffalo Bills. Now, I don't think they will accept this on the simulator, but you can force this trade. I think this is a realistic trade. The Buffalo Bills set themselves up nicely, I think, at pick 35, and we now have 2 picks in the second round. We have a pick in the 3rd round, and we have a pick in the 4th round, and a pick in the 5th round. And I think this is more Brandon Beane's speed in terms of where he wants to select players on the board.
Yeah, and just for the comments section, right? Like we know Latu's there. We're forcing the
Mhm.
trade anyway. I think
That's part of this.
that's
That's part of
that,
this experiment tonight.
that's the experiment tonight. So
That's
don't.
Latu could very well be the bait, right? Like Latu's the bait. The Cardinals
Yeah.
are like, oh, TJ Tampa, Lady Latu. We have Tampa a little bit higher on our board. We were a little concerned with Latu's medicals, but if we're just going to cost us a little bit of a trade up, boom. Like, so let's see who the Cardinals actually take here. I don't know what the simulator would give them, but I'm just out of curiosity. What
They
did the
did take
Cardinals?
Latu. They did
They
take
took
Latu.
Latu. Look at that. That's outside of me really not being that high on TJ Tampa. That's a pretty good draft for the Cardinals there. They get a corner. They're desperately in need of a corner. They get a pass rusher. They're desperately in need of a pass rusher, and they get a wide receiver. They are beyond desperate. They're more desperate at wide receiver than the Buffalo Bills. So to me, the Cardinals get ultra aggressive there. I'm gonna text my brother-in-law that trade because he's a Cardinals fan. I think he's gonna genuinely enjoy that trade, and he's gonna thank me for it. And now the Buffalo Bills set themselves up at pick 35. Who do the Buffalo Bills have on the board here?
Let me just answer Spin's question. The Bears got Odunze at 9, which I think was like the uber aggressive Bills option for people.
Yeah.
For some people. Anyway, so yes, we were trading down no matter what for the comment section for the scenario tonight. So right now on the board, best available, you've got Nate Wiggins, Jackson Powers Johnson, Graham Barton.
Tyler Newbin are tempting here. Chris Braswell is tempting here. Let's just take a look at the wide receivers first, because I think that's what everyone's going to want to take a look at. Darius Robinson is tempting here, right?
Yeah.
This guy we talked about in the
and
first
Darius
show.
are both there. So you got Jermaine Burton. Obviously, Leggett is there.
Yeah,
as well. You've got the Washington guys, Polk and McMillan.
I'll tell you. Here's what I will say. And again, there are intriguing names. There are intriguing names on the at other position groups, Graham Barton included, right? But we talk about what the Buffalo Bills want, right? Jermaine Burton, Xavier Leggett, like we talk about, like Roman Wilson's a double dip guy, right? Ricky Pearsall's a double dip guy. Keon Coleman, you can throw him into that sort of first category, but like we said, we're not that high on him. How many of these guys are not like double dip guys? So we could probably get Javon Baker if we wait till the 2nd pick. So do we want to wait for Javon Baker, or do we want to take Xavier Leggett now?
Yeah, and it's like you can start getting in these scenarios. You say like maybe we take Graham Barton and hope that Baker falls, right? Like that's
Darius Robinson is tempting because we talked about the edge and the defensive tackle flexibility you're getting out of Darius Robinson.
I think we got to take a wide receiver here. I think for me, the non-double dip guys, I think my 2 favorites right now would be Leggett or Polk would be the 2 that I would lean towards. I think the Bills could have interest in a guy like Coleman. I said that the other day. I don't love Coleman either. For me, I would probably just go back to the well versus what we did in our mock draft last week and go with Leggett. That would be what I would do.
Yeah, we jump ahead here of I believe we get ahead of Carolina's 2nd pick, which is where in reality I think that's where Xavier Leggett goes. To me, I personally would probably take Darius Robinson or Graham Barton here.
Yep.
But I'm with you. We can go Leggett again if you want. I personally would take Barton or Robinson here. And then I would wait for Javon Baker, who I'm confident can get to 60.
Let's mix it up then. Since we did do Leggett in our last mock, let's go a different direction with this one. I'm fine with Barton or Darius Robinson. Maybe we pull the comments section and see real quick what they feel on that out of those 2. So let's see. We've got some. There'll be run on wide receivers here. Like we're still
JPJ is on the board still too. That's interesting.
Team trade down says take Graham Barton. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of lean Darius Robinson here.
Yeah, me too. Let's do it. Let's take, because he fills that 3-tech role, right? He can sub for Ed Oliver when Ed Oliver needs to come on the field, and he can also provide you a pass rush on pass rushing downs, and he fits the Buffalo Bills archetype. So
sorry, comments.
Let's be a little different here. We're gonna go Darius Robinson Jr. We're gonna lose a lot of support here, I think. But then we're definitely taking a wide receiver at 60. We are taking a wide receiver at 60, whichever is on the board, top one on the board. We're taking him at 60, and then maybe start to look for a double dip at wide receiver or a safety. All right. So Michael Penix, this is a weird.
Oh, Jalen Polk is still available. Wow.
Javon Baker to me seems more like the Buffalo Bills
Yeah.
speed.
I think we go
That's just
Baker.
me personally. I think Baker is more the Bills speed.
Yeah.
Even though
I
I
think
like Polk. Yeah.
I think Polk or Baker here makes
Mhm.
we didn't take a Baker. Let's go
Let's
on
take
strike.
this is tough. This is really I mean, do we want to just be different here because everyone takes Javon Baker and go Jalen Polk? We just want to let's do it. Like let's let this be the non-conforming mock draft here. And let's
Yeah.
take Jalen
We got
Polk.
we got a few supporters for Polk in the comments
Eric's
section.
gonna text us and be like, you guys are fired.
We'll go Polk. We're just
Let's
mixing it
do it.
up here, people.
Yes,
Come
we're
on.
mixing
We're
it
just
up.
mixing up. And we're picking again here in a second.
All right.
Okay.
Now, Jonah Ellis, that's pretty. Kareem Adeniji, that's a tackle that I think checks a lot. Marshawn Newland's still there. Chris Jenkins is still there. So Chris Jenkins, I think, fits a lot. Oh, we took Darius Robinson. So go to the safeties and see what's available at safety. Because again, like we could just take the best players on the board, but how Cam Kinchins or Kalen Bullock here to me. Like I think you take Cam Kinchins or Kalen Bullock here. So I personally think that Kalen Bullock is being slept on. I think he's the best center fielder in this draft. I think that he can work on that stuff at the line of scrimmage. I think that USC's defense was so deplorably bad, and their defensive coordinator Gibbs is just probably the worst coach in the history of football. Like I really do think that Kalen Bullock could be a stud, but I also do agree that Cam Kinchins might be maybe more up the Bills' alley. He's got that relationship with Jamil Adai. So it's tricky here. Again, like it's tricky here.
I'd lean Kinchins if I was gonna decide between the two, given
I got
the
no
history
problem
of
with
the die and just given that, like to me, the tape on Kinchins.
I didn't say best safety in the draft, best center
Yep.
fielder in the draft. I think he's the
True.
best roaming playmaking center fielder in the draft.
Okay.
But let's go Kinchins because I think he's a little bit more versatile.
We'll go Kinchins.
And then again, we're now we now have a 4th rounder and a 5th rounder as opposed to, or 2 5th rounders as opposed to 2 and 3, correct?
Yes, we have right now. We're gonna our next pick's gonna be 128, which will be the end of the 4th.
I think we got to go back and look wide receiver before all the studs come off and all the studs might be off the board.
Let's
we
see.
took Jalen Polk, who to me is a Jacoby Myers type wide receiver, even though he didn't do as much of it in college, can be inside outside guy. So I really look Tyke is we already took the safety. Everyone. Scroll down a little bit though. Scroll down a little bit from the top of the board. I think that Trevor Keegan, the guard from Michigan, I think Trevor Keegan could be up the Bills' alley. He is a guy that the Bills had an offensive line coach at Michigan's pro day. I think Trevor Keegan is a guy that fits the Bills' profile. So let's just earmark Trevor Keegan as a guy that we might come back to here and talk about. But let's go look at the wide receivers and see who's on the board.
Cooper Beebe's there as well.
Cooper Beebe is there as well. Another favorite.
Don't love the value here for a wide receiver personally.
Oh yeah, I'm out. We're not going wide receiver here. Luke McCaffrey might be a consideration. Taj Washington is a good speed slot, but like they're wiped. It's the double dip dream is dead, at least for now. Braylon Allen is interesting, right? Like your guy, he's slipping, but he's that athletic guy. He can run block. Isaac Arendo is available. I really like him. The other guys, I think PFF is overvalued. Will Shipley, I don't like for the Bills, but I like. I think they're overvaluing some of the other guys there. But our guy Kamani Vidal might be there a little bit later.
Yep.
What other position group could we address here? Cornerback. Let's go take a look at corner, right? So that could be something.
Ooh, McLaughlin I like, but I think this might be a little too early.
A little too early for him.
I think
To me,
McLaughlin would be there with the next pick if we really wanted him.
it's got to be Keegan, or it's got to be Keegan, Cooper Beebe, or Braylon Allen here. I think.
I go O-line here. I
Yeah.
wouldn't take Braylon Allen here. I
Well,
would
go
go
to offensive
O-line.
tackle and see what offensive tackles are available. I like Christian Jones.
I
I
like
like
I like
Javon Foster.
I like Rouse too a little.
A little early for Rouse, I
But
think.
it's early. I think we
I
gotta
think it's got to be
go.
one of those guards, man.
Yeah, I agree. Keegan or BB, I
Ooh,
think,
Zach
right?
Zinter's tempting too. I know he's going to have to redshirt probably because of the injury, but that's tempting because he could be a day 2 guy.
My vote's for BB. I know you want like Keegan. We kind of went with my guy
Yeah,
last time in Kinchin,
let's.
so we can
Yeah,
go Keegan if you want.
the Bills had an offensive line coach at Michigan's pro day. Maybe it was for Zach Zinter, but I I say we go Keegan here.
Okay,
We'll go
let's
with
go with it.
the offensive line coach at the pro day here. That's our rationale behind that pick. I do think Keegan kind of reminds me a little bit of like
Oh,
a younger David Edwards.
BB goes to the Chiefs 2 picks
Ooh,
later.
that day. I just Brandon Beane myself, huh? That's going to be one of those ones where like 10 years later, people are like, out there. It's the new Dalton Reisner or Cody Ford over Dalton Reisner, 4th round edition.
All right. Here we are at pick 160. We already took the safety.
JT
I do
Bertrand
want to
as a
see if
linebacker is interesting.
McLaughlin's still there. He is the top corner on the board.
Yep.
That's interesting to me. Do like McLaughlin a lot. Grayson Murphy there as an edge. We don't have an edge player yet.
The other brother. We got Darius Robinson who can kind of do both. So
true.
Drake Nugent. If we want to go back to the well at offensive line, take another Michigan offensive lineman. Drake Nugent is a guy that I think gives me a lot of Brian Allen vibes, and a guy that maybe that's why the Buffalo Bills were at that Michigan pro day, taking a look at Drake Nugent. If you go back, JT Bertrand is a linebacker out of Notre Dame that I really like. I think he's being undervalued in this draft process. If you scroll down a little bit more too, James Williams, who has a familiarity with Bills DB coach Jamil Adai. James Williams could come in and be a special teamer. He could play linebacker and he could play box safety. Like,
do we take 2 Miami safeties in the same
versatile
draft?
Like, he's a versatile chess piece, right? Like that. I think that can be moved all around and used in some interesting ways. So if it were me, James Williams, Drake Nugent, and who's the other one there? If you scroll back up, Bertrand would be the 3 that I zero in on. We already took a safety, so Mustafa and Braid I think are a little redundant here. If you go to corner, is MJ Devonshire still on the board?
I believe so.
He's got
my guy McLaughlin would be who I would take.
Yeah,
but Devonshire is there.
Return flex, speed. He checks a lot of boxes. When's our next pick after this one?
We have pick 1.
Oh, we pick 2 later. We'll take Devonshire with the next pick or something. So, or McLaughlin. Like, we can just go full on DB action here. But to me, I'll go back to running back real quick.
Oops, sorry.
You know what? We have a pick in a couple. How about this? Go to wide receiver. Is McCaffrey still there? Someone just said McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Why not?
Let's do it.
Why not? Like,
we got to pick in 2 more picks.
Still learning the position. Had a good Shrine Week, impressing a lot of people. I think it's an interesting sort of I don't want to say it's just a dart, right? But you're betting on the traits there. So who went in those 2 picks? Mustafa
and Braid, which was fine because we didn't need either. So
yeah, I mean, we took Keegan.
I would probably go Devonshire or McLaughlin here.
Yeah, Devonshire. I think Devonshire gives you the return flex, and Buffalo loves those Pittsburgh DBs.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll just go on record and continue to say I like McLaughlin just in general for the process, but we'll go with Devonshire for this pick. Bills love the Pitt DBs, and he does have the return ability. I do like AJ Woods too as a Pitt.
Yeah, I love AJ Woods as like a gunner / depth corner.
Yep. So I think it's rounding out pretty well.
I like what we're doing so far. I think add a linebacker, add a running back. I think we got to add a running back here. Oh, Jalen Simpson just sticks out though. Hunter Nazard sticks out. Do we go back to the well? How many picks we got left? 3?
Yeah, 2. We actually have 200 and 204 coming up right here, so we have a couple picks.
So let's look at running backs.
Oh, your
Frank
guys
Gore
there,
Jr.
Frank Gore.
Love Frank Gore Jr.
Blake Watson is
I probably made
available.
a very unattractive sound of that microphone just right now. Being
It's a
Frank
little
Gore Jr. Oh boy,
disturbing. A little disturbing there.
just a little bit. And he's the top one too. So on the simulator he could go in these 4 picks.
So let's see. Let's check linebacker.
Let's see. We'll go tackle first. I think the Bills really might try
Ooh,
to.
Caden Wallace. I do like Caden
I
Wallace.
love. This is Caden Wallace. I like him too. He seems like a Cromer guy. Like tackle. Brandon Coleman is so low on
Yeah.
this PFF.
I like
Brandon
Caden
Coleman is
Wallace.
not going to be there. We're not picking Brandon Coleman just for the sheer fact that he will not be there.
Should I go to linebacker?
Pure centers. Look at the pure centers on the IOLs.
Well, I'm sure my NC State guy will be there.
Nazard, pure center,
McMahon.
Bortolini. Dude, they're way too low on Bortolini too in this simulator. McMahon is Nugent's gone. I take it.
Yeah,
I like
Nugent's gone.
CJ Hansen out of Holy Cross too. I'll tell you what. Caden Wallace is tempting. How about let's look at the defense now. Let's see if there's a fun edge to play with here. Nothing that really fans the flames here. How about linebacker? Because we obviously could use another. I think they're going to carry 6 linebackers this year with the new kickoff rules. So I think there is one more linebacker spot to be earned. Steel Chambers, great name. Jalen Ford, Curtis Jacobs. They met with at the. I think
Jordan
Curtis Jacobs.
McGee.
I think Curtis Jacobs is the guy they met with at the Senior Bowl. Had a formal with. So Frank Gore Jr., Curtis Jacobs, Caden Wallace are the ones I'm zeroing in on now. At this point,
I like. My vote would be for Wallace personally, but
yeah, let's go Caden Wallace and then see if Frank Gore Jr. is still available after that. And if he's not, I'm going to jump off a bridge, but we'll be fine.
He's available.
Right. Oh, take him. Yes, I am like what's his name, Thanos. I just added that final Infinity Stone right there with Frank Gore Jr.
We got
one pick left. We gotta go linebacker with this last pick.
So I think if McGee's there, I would take him. I like him, but yeah, I agree with you. I think linebacker makes sense. Love a late round linebacker. All right.
We could take Tua's brother just to fuck with the Dolphins. Excuse my language here, but just to mess with the Dolphins. I try not to swear anymore.
Easton Gibbs is available.
He did not test very well. No. Darius Masaw had a really good Shrine Bowl. I like Masaw. Nathaniel Watson has a ton of special teams experience in his career. Udo Fushio out of Washington is I don't think he'll be there in the 7th round, but I love him as a linebacker. So we can go that direction.
Yeah, I'm good with any. You get the final call on this one.
Keep scrolling down because the linebackers are weird. PFF. Yeah, go back up. Those guys all suck. Eric Gentry is bad. You know what? Take Uwafashu out of Washington, even though I don't think he'll be there. Let's just that's
it, folks. That is it. With the trade down.
I like this draft. I don't remember half of our picks, but I think I'm really gonna. I like it. I think some people out a little. EFF does not like it.
B-.
Man, I just think Darius Robinson gives you a backup to Ed Oliver, and he gives you edge rotation snaps, and I think he can be an impact player on the defensive line. I really do with those long arms, and I'm a lot more comfortable with him in the 2nd round than I am in the 1st round. Jalen Polk, I think, is literally maybe a more souped up version of Jacoby Myers, which is
they like that pick the best of all of our picks.
Because Jacoby Myers did not test well, right? Like Jacoby Myers went undrafted for a reason. Jalen Polk, I think, gives you a lot of what Jacoby Myers gives you, but in a much more athletic body, right? So that's fun. Cam Kinchins, again, they didn't like him for the Bills because I think they don't even have safety as a need for us. But he's a versatile secondary piece that could be a starter instantly or a starter into the future. I think Trevor Keegan in the 4th round could literally compete to be the starting left guard day 1. And if not, David Edwards only signed a 1-2 year contract. So he's a guy who could slide in there at left guard.
Yeah, I think so.
Luke McCaffrey could end up being maybe like a steal of the draft if he develops, and the Bills don't have to rush him onto the field, right? They can just use him as part of a rotation. Right now, it's not about maybe feeding an X. It's about spreading the ball around. So you don't have to worry too much about getting Luke McCaffrey on the field early if you don't need to. Devonshire gives you return flex. He gives you
I
an
hated
athletic
that pick.
body to mold in the secondary. Caden Wallace gives you that tackle guard flex. He's an Aaron Cromer type. I think Frank Gore Jr. is literally Devin Singletary, but you got him 3 rounds later, which is awesome. And then Ifashi right there, who is a depth linebacker, special teamer. I think you're going to need more of those guys with the new kickoff rules. I like this draft. Like I really do like this draft.
I like it too. I think the trade down to me worked, right? You had your option of Polk or Baker, right? We went at that pick at pick 60. Javon Baker was available. Polk was available. That to me is a win. If you have options trading down, you get the help you need on the defensive line early, young injection of youth in the defensive line. One thing we did not address in this particular draft was really like a true interior, I would say, defensive lineman. But I think you're hoping that Darius Robinson kind of being that first pick here can fill, you can put him in year one where you need him, right? Most. So that to me is interesting. I love the first 4 picks, right? And I think there was a comment made, and I think Preston Haydenfield in the comment section was right in saying those last 3 picks ideally could have been used to move up with more trade ups. But at the end of the day, right, this is not, you end up with 9 players.
I can envision a role for every single player on that football team, and I can envision most of them stepping on the field year one. Like the linebacker at the last pick, special teams. Frank Gore Jr., I think could compete to be RB2. Keenan Wallace, I think, could be an instant impact. Like, I think he could instantly be a second string offensive lineman. Like, I don't think he's going to be like a redshirt guy. And if their injuries happen, I think a guy like Caden Wallace, under the tutelage of Aaron Cromer, might be able to step on the field in year one. And he gives you a lot of flexibility in year 2 to possibly be even a starter in year 2. Devonshire is going to get in the field as a returner early, and he's got a really good athletic profile for the Buffalo Bills, who have proven they're really good with DBs to work with. McCaffrey, you can probably do some fun things with him early. Keegan could honestly usurp David Edwards. And then you got the 3 guys who I think could step in and start from day one, or play a part in the rotation from day one. So I love this draft.
Listen, I just have to respond to Pete. He says, this is good, although I put your houses on Zillow for trading off Latu. We were doing the trade no matter who was on the board.
We were doing the trade no matter what.
It was an experiment. We said we're trading down no matter what.
Experiment.
That's what we were doing. So yes, obviously, I think we would all.
Marvin Harrison Jr. could have been on the board, and we would have traded back tonight.
Yes,
we probably would have hit the reset. We probably would have hit the reset button.
That was the experiment. But yes, I think that it just shows an option, right? Like, this is the time of year, and look, everyone's doing mock drafts. Like we're guilty of it as well. We're trying to do a different type of thought experiment here, right? And a lot of people are talking about trading up now because of the Diggs trade to go up and get Thomas or Neighbors or Odunze. But like, this is something different, right? Where you kind of trade back to trade up in a way, right? Because you get the 3rd rounder. So it's an interesting experiment. I liked it. I mean, it's something different.
And this could be a case too. Like, maybe in reality, something like this could happen because Josh Allen's the next Elway comes in and says, I don't like Latu, neck fusion surgery, too much risk. I love Latu, but yes, neck fusion surgery. Maybe the Buffalo Bills are like, nah, we don't like his medicals. But the Arizona Cardinals are like, we're fine with his medicals. We want him. Now you have leverage to get to, I don't want to say rip off a team because there's only a 7-point difference, but get a team to move up, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a blue chip talent that you don't feel comfortable with because of an injury.
The Cardinals be willing to take that risk.
Lure somebody to your pick. Yeah. Can lure somebody to come and get your pick.
And it's not like the Cardinals, like, it's not like that was like they would have already had 2 first-round picks before that. So that's a worthwhile swing for them, most likely. And also we didn't take Leggett either at 35 because we had taken him in our last mock draft, or we probably would have taken him. So yeah.
All right. So we'll be back tomorrow night talking about our favorite offensive linemen in the 2024 NFL draft. And then after that, next week, Dave, I think it's day 3 prospects next week. And then the week after, it's our no matter what list. And then we are there, man.
Draft coverage coming up.
The NFL draft. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for joining us this evening on a Sunday night. We will be back again tomorrow, 9 p.m., talking our favorite offensive linemen in this year's draft. Please, more people watch this than the running back show. Apparently, Dave, no one cares what our thoughts are on the running backs in this draft class, because that might be
more
our
people. People don't care about running backs, I think, for the Bills right now. It's like it's maybe the lowest priority outside of quarterback and tight end.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Always appreciate you. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!